Eagles Entertainment.
With the 15th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, presented by Life Brand. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we are going to put a ribbon on our coverage of the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. And we're going to start it off with Draft Buzz as I welcome back Dane Brugler and Ben Fennell to talk through the standout performances from last week overall, including the game on Saturday. So plenty to talk about with those guys, just kind of putting a ribbon on our coverage from the Senior Bowl and what that means for a lot of these prospects as we move forward through the next stages of the draft process. Then we get to On the Clock, and again, returning to that new version of that segment where Ben, Dane, and I, we're going to pick some players for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Seattle Seahawks, and Arizona Cardinals. So if you're a fan of either of those three teams, or you just want to learn more about players throughout the course of the draft, make sure you stay tuned for that segment. And then we'll wrap things up with our draft mailbag. A couple of good questions, including a good one about the linebacker position in this draft. Before we get there, as always, make sure you leave us a rating, leave us a review, whether it's on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify, wherever you listen, head on over, leave us a rating, leave us a review. If you've got a question, we will answer it here on an upcoming episode. Like I said, in our draft mailbag, we've got a couple good ones here from you at home. That said, let's get started. Excited to start things off here with Draft Buzz, Ben Fennell and Dane Brugler.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, well, excited to kick things off with Draft Buzz as we kind of wrap up our coverage of the Reese's Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. The game happened on Saturday. And guys, that's where we're going to start there as I welcome in Ben Fennell and Dane Brugler. Guys, let's talk through the game on Saturday and some of our bigger takeaways. We'll just start with a standout player from the game. Dane, who stood out most to you just from the game on Saturday?
Yeah, and this is low-hanging fruit because he was named the game's MVP. But I'm going with Oklahoma's Perrian Winfrey. 5 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. And you know, we talk about how the game doesn't matter nearly as much as the practices. That's where, for evaluation purposes, it's really important. But it's also interesting to see the guys that, continue that momentum into game day. Some guys shut it down after a few good practices. Winfrey, he only heated it up. It started at weigh-ins, 6'4", 303, 35.5-inch arms, almost 86-inch wingspan. Brought it every day in practice, and then he didn't slow down on game day. He was a wrecking ball up front.
Yeah, it just felt like him just putting an exclamation point on the week, right? And we've talked a lot last week about that performance on Wednesday in the rain and how he was kind of the tempo setter there that day in practice. And for him to kind of follow that up and have that kind of game that he did on Saturday, I think that was notable. Ben, who's the guy that stood out to you on film from the game on Saturday?
Well, I guess we'll go to the other low-hanging fruit, and that's some of the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I thought Kenny Pickett operated his drive flawlessly, being 6 of 6, moving his team right down the field for a touchdown. Looked like a continuation of his play and film at Pittsburgh this past season. And then Malik Willis, some of his playmaking out of structure, I think finally got to show that off under live circumstances, which obviously practice, you're wearing those red or Reese's orange jerseys during the week, so no one's going to touch you. It was great to see he had 4 carries for 54 yards, and just that creatability outside of structure is a big part of his game. And it's a big part of succeeding in the NFL late in the down. So a little bit of structured play from Kenny Pickett and his nice drive, and then Malik Willis really showing off what he could provide to an offense.
On that one scramble where he cut back to the left, he had a nose for the end zone. He was hoping he could sneak in there. He ended up getting taken out of bounds around the 5-yard line. Dane, I know you highlighted Malik as one of your matchups coming into Saturday. Did he kind of live up? Did you get to see what you wanted to see from Malik on Saturday?
Yes and no. Obviously we saw what he did from an athleticism perspective. He is dynamic. He is really, really impressive. And not just scrambling, but moving the pocket and, buying those extra half seconds with his legs. As a passer, is a little up and down in terms of, locating where he needed to go with the football, especially after that first read. And that's really the question mark we have with him going through the process is just going to be the post-snap ability to work through reads. And so I think that question is still there. But, in terms of the traits, what we thought based off of tape and coming in, he's certainly, checked those boxes. He has the arm, certainly has the athleticism.
Yeah, and just to put that quarterback conversation to bed real quick, Fran,
sure.
A guy whose name we didn't hear a whole lot during the week, Sam Howell, I thought had a really strong week kind of behind the scenes from what I'm hearing in his talk with some teams and some interviews as well. He showed off some ability to create outside of structure and in structure with some design quarterback runs as well. He is a tough tough, competitive player, both running and throwing the ball. So he's a guy that's experienced, maybe didn't have a supporting cast in 2021 like we had all hoped and maybe expected for a senior campaign. But Sam Howell, don't forget about him. He had a good week and a good game.
Yeah, that was something that we always you could always hang your hat on Sam Howell's toughness, whether it was in the pocket, whether it was as a runner. We saw that more this year. His toughness has always been one of the standout qualities of his game. Let's get just overall from the course of the week, and we can factor the game into this as well. Dane, I'll come back to you on this one. Overall winner for the week. Who's a guy that just coming out of Senior Bowl week, you get home and you're like, man, like this guy really helped himself the most?
Yeah, I think I have to go back to the defensive line because to me, the theme of this week was the defensive line and how much it dominated. And really, if you would have asked me before the Senior Bowl, what's the weakest position in the draft, I might have said defensive tackle. It's at least down the list of best positions in this draft. So it's really good to see some of these defensive tackles really show out. Mentioned Perrian Winfrey, how good he was in the game, then also during practice. Travis Jones belongs in there. But I think Devonte White, I think, is my answer here. Out of Georgia, a guy that was, we talked about before, obviously, throughout the season and then during Senior Bowl week, hidden a little bit in that Georgia defense just because he wasn't allowed to get a lot of single matchups and, be able to be disruptive in the backfield on a regular basis. But this is a former high school linebacker. So he has speed, he has athleticism, he's agile. When he had those one-on-one opportunities and drills, he was destroying guys. So, Devonte White to me is a player who came in with expectations, and I thought he surpassed them. So it was really good to see this defensive tackle class step up, especially with Wyatt, who, he could be the first defensive tackle drafted. I think it's possible. Jordan Davis wasn't there. Obviously, very different types of defensive tackles here, what we're talking about. But it would not shock me at all if Devonte White's the first defensive tackle drafted in this on draft day.
Wyatt's quickness off the ball is one thing that really kind of stood out to me throughout the course of the week. That was something that we didn't always get to see in that Georgia defense. So seeing him kind of come off the ball, threaten the edges, be able to be a disruptor in the backfield, I thought that was really impressive from him over the course of the week. Ben, how about you?
Yeah, I'm glad. I love that pick of Wyatt. And for any kind of situational film junkies out there, just watch 3rd and 5+ over the last 3 years of Georgia and all the creative ways he was used, whether it's a mugging pass rusher in a stand-up position, QB spying, a lot of stunts and twists. You could really see that kind of dancing panda profile. But I'm going to go with Zion Johnson out of Boston College. I think he's one of the low-hanging fruit answers as well. His obviously anchor and balance and footwork was outstanding all week. His contributions at center, which wasn't expected apparently, and then gave a lot of obviously work after practice and trying to perfect that craft. But it's also a perfect storm of why he's the overall winner. I don't think Boston College was on a lot of TV sets on Saturdays for people around the country. Kind of an uninspiring. I think they were 6-6 this year. Their Military Bowl got canceled. That stuff matters as far as eyeballs, buzz, stock, things like that late into the season. You're not competitive. You're not then playing into a bowl game on a national stage. And then suddenly Zion Johnsons of the world go quiet. He was a Davidson transfer, so kind of an interesting background in getting to BC, played some tackle, played some guard, really had to kind of solidify what he was going to be at the next level. And I think this was his kind of coming out party, for lack of better words. I know, yes, they have played Clemson in the Worlds and have had some nice upset wins here and there with that nice program that Jeff Hafley is now turning around there. But Zion Johnson, with the kind of buzz coming into the week, I thought he really took advantage. Zion Johnston, Boston College, one of the best interior linemen in the class.
Yeah, he won Practice Player of the Week, overall Practice Player of the Week on Friday night. And I think when you look at his overall performance, there were some bad reps, sure, but a lot of them were at center where Ben, like you said, he had not played. I mean, he was the backup center for BC all season. He did some work in practice, but we had not seen him at the center position in a game over the course of his career. He was a left tackle in 2020, left guard this past season, as well as in 2019, where I thought he was outstanding. So just getting a chance.
And Fran, I went and ran to his Davidson tape real fast to go see if he played center.
Right.
Completely forgot it's one of the strong weaknesses offenses where they flip the tackle. So he'll be on the left side one play, then all of a sudden the formational strength changes the next play, and he's playing right tackle. And he'd crush the guy on the left side, then the right side. It was a lot of fun, but no snaps at center his entire collch career.
Yeah, go back to high school. He was he only played tackle. So yeah, zero center experience in a game is really his entire career.
And that presents so many different challenges than just going from right guard to left guard. I mean, you're then figuring out, hand exchange and replacing and where to put that offhand and the snap hand. It's a completely different set of rules and techniques to move over to center. I know we kind of lump in center guard, but as far as the mechanisms of getting your hands to the right spot while snapping the football, it's not something guys just pick up, as a hobby off the cuff. So really impressive work from Zion.
And I love, too, the 2 days that he stayed after practice to work on the QB center exchange. The first day was with Kenny Pickett, and it was a lot of under center exchange. And then the second day is with Desmond Ridder, where it was all shotgun exchange. So that was also kind of unique as well, just kind of seeing the thought process into his preparation. For me, I just want to go back to the receiver position. I feel like, was this receiver group, when you look at both squads, was it as strong as we normally see down there in Mobile? I would say no. But I think overall, when you look at two guys that stood out, they were the two guys that won the practice player of the week for each squad. Christian Watson from North Dakota State, Calvin Austin from Memphis, two complete opposites in terms of the body type. Watson 6'3", 200 plus, Calvin Austin 5'7", 170 and change. I think when you look at both of these guys, though, they rarely put the football on the ground. They showed the ability to separate. They did it in a number of different ways. I thought Watson was really consistent throughout the week, and Calvin Austin, maybe one of the more underrated weeks of any player at any position. It just was a really, really tough cover everywhere on the field, not just down in the red zone, but also out in space. I thought that everything that he did was just really, really impressive. So Christian Watson, Calvin Austin, let's give those guys some love at the wide receiver position.
No receiver created more separation throughout the week than Austin. I mean, he was that short area quickness. He would win over the top. He's a small target, obviously. So, it's a smaller catch radius, but he's a guy that can get open. And that's obviously has a ton of value in today's passing game.
Consistently plucked the football, was always catching balls away from his frame. And what I love, too, about Austin, there were a number of reps. They did a couple of point of attack drills, just individual, taking on a corner out in the flat. He gave great effort in those plays. Just saying, a guy that is that small, he plays a little bit bigger than that size, which is good to see. It just gives you a sense of his temperament as well.
And after those 3 practice sessions, he was the number one guy I wanted to go and kind of refresh on the tape because I kind of brushed through it, earlier in the season. I was blown away. He's small, but he's very competitive. He's small, but can beat press coverage.
Yep.
He's small, but knows how to run routes and get himself open. He's not just an over-the-top guy. And just to remind everybody, 9-time state champion in different sprints in high school. We're talking 100 meters, 200 meters, 60 meters, relays. This kid has explosive speed, was a member of the Memphis track team, and walked on to the football team, if I'm not mistaken. And that's kind of how his football career started. Very similar height, weight, speed to Isaiah McKenzie and how he was used this past season with the Buffalo Bills. So that height, weight, maybe not for everybody at 5'7", 175, but it succeeded on Sundays in a variety of packages. So Isaiah McKenzie, I think, is a pretty relevant receiver comp.
So as I was thinking about Calvin Austin for the overall winner, it also got me thinking all right, well, who are some players that we didn't talk enough about last week that maybe deserve a little bit more praise? And so I thought, let's make this a kind of a category here. And Ben, I'll come to you first. Who was the guy that you felt deserved a little bit more love just from the coverage of last week's event in Mobile?
Well, it's a guy we've been hyping up, or I've been hyping up quite emphatically over the last few weeks and into the Senior Bowl. And I feel like we're just getting desensitized to this guy making plays and always being right there on receiver and tight ends' backs and being right where he needs to in short zones and in the run game. And that's Jalen Petrie out of Baylor. I think he's made so many plays. He didn't have that one splash play that took over Twitter or have that one impactful play that got all the buzz. He was just consistently solid all week at a variety of positions. And it was no accident. All those tough catches that Trey McBride made, that Jalen Petrie was right on his back each time. He's a guy that was always in position, smart kid, had a couple nice PBUs, just not that signature play that, for all intents and purposes, sometimes that's what gets your name out there and gets some buzz and you make some highlights. And next thing you know, you're the one they're interviewing on SportsCenter at night. And that's where legends grow and buzz grows. And Jalen Petrie had a great week. Not enough attention, in my opinion.
I love it. Yeah. And he's just such a fun player to study just because of his play personality and that versatility. He worked with wide receiver DBs. He matched up against backs and tight ends all throughout the week. Just a really fun player to study. Dane, how about you?
Yeah, and I think that I was worried there that Ben was going to take who I was going to pick and snipe me, but I'm going with Tariq Woolen, who I know we've talked about before, on the pod, and we've talked up a freaks list guy, but I don't think we're talking enough about how early this guy could go. We're talking about 6'3", over 200 pounds. He is going to run ridiculous at the combine. Zebra Technology does their metrics, miles per hour, and they've been doing it the last 4 years at the Senior Bowl. Only 4 players have gotten above 22 miles per hour during Senior Bowl practices. Tariq Woolen has the fastest time they've ever clocked, just ahead of Terry McLaurin at 22.45 miles per hour. And so not only does he have the size at 6'3", 205, 33.5-inch arms, but he has the speed, which we knew he had, but he confirmed it. And then I thought he had a good week of practice. I thought for a guy that has that long legs, you worried about him getting tied up in his transitions and just that long gait and not being able to collect himself and drive. And I thought he did a nice job staying composed, staying patient, staying on top of routes. And when he did have maybe a false step or something, he was able to recover and show off that length, and where he's able to get back in phase and make a play on the ball. So Tariq Woolen, I don't think we're talking enough about just how high this guy could go.
And I thought he got better throughout the week as well, which you're always looking at for guys that come from lower levels of competition. I mean, UTSA is a group of 5 school, but you like him coming in and just getting better throughout the course of the week. And 6'3", 200 pounds with that kind of freakish athleticism, that's going to catch a lot of eyes. So yeah, I would agree with you, and that he's a player that maybe we're not talking enough about in terms of how high he could go. For me, I'm going to go with a late ad. I'm going to go with a guy that we didn't see until Thursday's practice, the indoor practice, and we got to see him a little bit in the game as well. TJ Pledger, the running back from Utah, some dynamic qualities with him. I mean, you saw the ability to get vertical in the pass game. He's kind of a tough physical runner despite his frame, but I thought what he showed from a pass game standpoint kind of caught my eye. I was like, all right, we didn't talk about this guy after Thursday's practice, but I thought he showed some dynamic qualities, and in the game he kind of flashed as well. So TJ Pledger from Utah, another running back to keep an eye on here in this senior class. All right, here's another question for you guys. Who's a player that's making you go back and watch more just because of how well they performed? Ben, you kind of referred to that with Calvin Austin earlier. Is there a player that kind of fits that bill for you guys? Dane, I'll come to you first.
Tariq Castro-Fields is a player that I just didn't really love on the tape. I thought that we started talking about him, maybe it feels like 3 years ago, and it just felt like the hype got a little out of control with where relative to what he was putting on the tape. But I thought he had a good week of practice. It's really going to make me kind of go back and say, okay, his athleticism, he has it, but in terms of the functional athleticism to stay in phase and stay, in the receiver's hip pocket, I thought he did a much better job of that in one-on-ones that he did on his Penn State tape, especially this past year. So I think Castro-Fields is a guy that's going to make me go back to the tape and kind of figure him out a little more.
Yeah, he's a player I thought you said it was just rock solid across the week, competed really, really well. It made one of the highlight plays of the week with that interception on day one in one-on-one drills over Alec Pierce. Ben, who's a player for you that kind of caught your eye from that standpoint?
And real quick, I'm not sure how much ambient noise gets picked up by my mic, but my chair is having a bad day with the squeaks. Just letting you know in case some of the sounds popping through here and all sorts of squeaks and things back here. It wasn't a big bean day like Roger Mccreary likes. But I went back and I need to look at this Oklahoma defense because Perrian Winfrey and Brian Asamoah had heck of a weeks down there in Mobile. And I need to go back and double check their tapes because Perrian Winfrey, I did not like his tape at all. I think he's more of a kind of a project developmental guy with some really exciting tools that he was able to show off this week. That's going to get you excited. But I had a lot of issues on tape with his pad level, his balance, his hand usage, snap anticipation, block IDs, counter moves, had to use a lot of stunts to kind of free him up. A lot to be desired on that tape. Now, he did always play with consistent effort, play with a really good motor, chase the ball all over the place, which you absolutely love. I think we all saw that kind of infectious play style this past week. Has a lot of upside to grow, but he's going to need some work. The other guy is Brian Asamoah, who is just, I think, 6 foot even, 222, a little undersized, speedy linebacker. I'm not so sure his positional fit and projection is settled yet because that's the same kind of height weight as Kyle Duggar or Adrian Amos coming out, quarter safeties and kind of box safeties and nickel Sam type of players. I think he could be used a little bit better in space and some in short area zones. I didn't love his pop in his hands. Doesn't really have stack and shed ability. He's a through and through kind of run and chase will linebacker, which I think is going to give him some problems. But he has really good speed, athleticism, makes plays to the alley. He's a good blitzer, good QB spy. I love his athleticism. Just a little bit worried about his size. So those Oklahoma defenders, Oklahoma tape, that was big on my film study over the weekend.
Asamoah is a good one because he definitely kind of outperformed what I expected when I watched on film. I saw a guy that wasn't always great through contact and maybe just a little bit slow to react at times. He had a really quick trigger all week. I started day one. He made a couple plays in the flat. He made a couple plays in the backfield. The athleticism has been always there, but I thought he was just really good from start to finish. I was not surprised at all that he won the linebacker of the week award.
That's right. He did get that award, which is voted on by the players going against him, which so it definitely holds a lot of merit.
And that was working with Chad Muma and with Troy Anderson, who we talked plenty about last week. So Asamoah standing out to his teammates a little bit better than those guys.
That was a good linebacker group down there.
It was.
I very much wanted to say Damone Clark. That was the very next guy I watched and studied yesterday. I thought he had a great week in one-on-ones, team, the game. He's a really impressive player too.
Damone Clark, linebacker from LSU. I actually want to talk about his teammate on the offensive side of the ball, Ed Ingram at guard, who I thought was just really, really good throughout the week. And it's really it hit me probably late after watching Wednesday's practice. So, watching Tuesday, I was like, all right, he was solid. I watched Wednesday. I was like, man, no one is getting past this guy. He was so strong. His hand use was outstanding. And then even in the run game and team drills, 9-on-7, 11-on-11, he was a bully in the run game. I thought that he was really, really good from start to finish. He also ended up winning Offensive Lineman of the Week, I believe, for the national squad. So I think when you look at Ed Ingram with the way that he kind of performed, it's like, man, maybe we got to start kind of rising him up the offensive line ranking, especially that interior group. We talked a lot about Zion Johnson. Ed Ingram, potentially worked his way up into the latter stages of day two, maybe even earlier than that. So Ed Ingram, a guy that really, really stood out to me. Guys, that said, we are now going to kind of turn our attention to the combine. And I know how you guys work. It's kind of similar to how I work. It was so much time spent on the senior class leading into the All-Star game circuit. Now that we're out of that, all right, well, now we're getting ready for the combine. We got underclassmen. If there are some guys that I do want to ask you, who is the first player that you studied coming out of the All-Star circuit? So coming out of Senior Bowl week, coming out of Shrine week, looking at underclassmen, who's the first guy on your mind to be able to study? Dane, I'll come to you first.
Well, for me, it was a pair of Pac-12 corners, underclassmen guys. Chris Steele from USC, Mikhail Wright from Oregon. I think both these guys, they were highly recruited. Chris Steele started at Florida and then was there for a couple months before he transferred to USC. Mikhail Wright came in with a lot of pub. And just trying to figure both these guys out. Mikhail Wright, I was a little underwhelmed with. I think he's got speed. I think that he moves well, but I don't see suddenness and that receivers are able to separate a little bit. Steele, I expect a little bit more from too, but I still need to do more work on both of them to try and figure out exactly where they fit in this corner class.
I thought for sure you were about to say Trent McDuffie.
No, I've already done him. I've got a pretty high grade on him. I think he's a top 20, 25 player in this class.
Yeah,
I remember watching Mikhail Wright with that Oregon. I mean, that Oregon secondary, his freshman year, you had Diamond Lenore and who was the other corner that played for
Graham?
Yes,
Thomas Graham.
Yes, Thomas Graham. Thank you. But you also had Verone McKinley, who's in this class, and the second round pick for the Dolphins.
Javon Holland.
Javon Holland. It was a star-studded group. Watching that whole secondary was no question. I mean, that secondary was loaded, and he did have a really standout freshman year. I'm excited to get through his film. Ben, who's the guy on your list? At the top of your list, I should say.
Hey, speak for yourselves, guys, because I got every redshirt sophomore in this class done at this point, all right? So I'm way ahead of the underclassmen. But another guy in the kind of, we're desensitized to his abilities. 3-year starter in the SEC, great size, vertical speed, everything you want. It's Jalen Weidermeier out of Texas A&M, who's 6'5", 260, I think has all the tools and ability. He's going to be one of the first I study in this post-Senior Bowl kind of stretch up to the combine of underclassmen. I need to figure out where he is in the pecking order. I wasn't that impressed with Trey McBride down there in Mobile. So I want to see, does Weidermeier have what it takes to maybe be tight end 1 in this class.
The top of the tight end class, I think it's wide open.
Yes, it is.
And I think there's like 6 guys that are really. I mean, you talk about McBride. I think Rucker is up there. Cade Otton, who we didn't get to see at the Senior Bowl because he was injured, I think is up there. Isaiah Likely, he different type of tight end, but he's in that mix. Greg Dulcich from UCLA, same type of thing. I mean, and throw Weidermeier in there. So that's 6 guys who I think all have a chance to be top 75 picks. And I don't know that I would take any of them in the top 40. So it's going to be fun trying to sort the top of this tight end group out.
And one of the darlings of the Shrine Week, what about Jelani Woods? 6'7", 260 with those pillow hands and route running ability. He's an interesting player too.
It's funny. I'm glad you brought up Weidermeier, Ben, because I actually studied him and my pick that I was going to go with both this morning. Weidermeier is interesting. Obviously, a 3-year starter. He was a big recruit. He came up to Texas A&M and started as a true freshman. And I think you're looking at all the physical traits. He's a fluid athlete. He gets in and out well. He can get down the seam. I'd like to see him get a little bit better as a route runner and as a blocker. I didn't think he was great in any one area this year. The one thing that's really interesting, he had a lot of drops this year, like uncharacteristic amount of drops. And that was the rough part, I think, for this season. He was still very productive, but had a number of drops, a number of balls I think he would have liked to have back. But the talent is absolutely there. So I think when you look at him, he's going to be a really intriguing player.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to really emphasize on the run game and see where I can project him at the next level in the run game. I felt like I had a good assessment of what he does in the pass game. Might have to study those drops, though.
Yeah, take a look at those from this year because that was definitely an issue for him, more so than any other year. For me, it was Trayvon Walker was the guy that I was kind of putting off throughout the course of the season because sometimes when you get those 1-year starters, maybe they decide to go back to school for that extra year, and then by the time he really kind of caught on, I was locked in on doing the senior class. So, all right, he'll be the first guy I do when I get back from Mobile. Guys, he reminds me of Zadarius Smith in so many different ways. And I think we kind of talked about like bumping him inside. Is he going to be a part of the D tackle group? I see him as a pure edge guy. I mean, look, they stood him up off the edge. He dropped back in coverage. He's creating interceptions, getting into throwing lanes. Like he does some really impressive things from an athletic standpoint. What I love most about him, number one, obviously the effort. We've talked about that numerous times, but then also the pure power that he plays with. He can push the pocket on command. He's a great run defender on the edge, an outstanding run defender. So I think he's a 3-down player all day. It's a matter. I think you started getting into the conversations about ceiling, but Trayvon Walker was the first guy I wanted to study coming out of the Senior Bowl, and just a really, really fun player. That said, guys, let's transition into one of my favorite segments. It's a segment where we kind of take on the role of kind of going through the paces as an NFL team. It's time for On the Clock.
On the Clock.
All right, so we're going to return back to the new version of that segment. We haven't done it here in a couple of weeks, obviously, with the All-Star game schedule. But for new listeners, basically the way this is going to go, we have a randomizer, right? Or just a website you can kind of plug in a bunch of random items. So each of us were assigned a random team, a random position, and a random part of the draft. And we just tried to play matchmaker here, knowing what we know about certain NFL teams and how they kind of approach the draft process. And for me this week, I was assigned the Pittsburgh Steelers in round 1. They've got the 20th overall pick, and I was assigned the offensive tackle position. I think overall, when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, the way that they've operated over the course of time, mainly big schools. So I definitely try to stay in the big pool bucket. Versatility does matter. And I think that it's kind of interesting kind of looking at, the couple of the tackles that I think you're talking about in the later stages of round 1, a couple of guys that we saw last week at the Senior Bowl. And Dane, I'm interested to kind of get your thoughts on how these two guys performed in your eyes. But to me, it came down to Daniel Falalele and Bernard Raymond, just looking at offensive tackle. And I didn't think Falalele had a great week last week. I didn't think Raymond had a particularly great last week. But obviously, you don't want to go overboard in terms of everything you see in Mobile and take the whole body of work into consideration. When I'm looking at the offensive tackle spot, I think when you look at Falalele, he kind of fits some of the players that they have selected in the past. I think when you look at his size, the height, weight, speed aspect of him, really, really interesting. That said, while I mentioned that they like the big schools, the one time that they will go into like the group of 5 area are the schools that are right within like that footprint and that part of the country. And so you'll see them go into the MAC. Obviously, they've had a lot of success. You go to Central Michigan and Toledo. They've had a lot of success picking players from those schools. Antonio Brown from Central Michigan. So Bernard Raymond kind of slides in there for me. I'm kind of interested to see what you guys think of those two that pairing of offensive tackles being a fit there for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I like it, and I don't know that. Let me rephrase. I like the Raymond pick. I think with his core strength, with his ability, there are times where he will lose the corner. He doesn't have that elite lateral range, but I do think that he recovers nicely and he can mirror. The big thing with Falalele, and this was really stood out during the practices at Senior Bowl, is just his struggles with range and struggles to mirror. Like if he gets his weight off, leaning just a little bit, yep, he gets destroyed. And you mentioned how the Steelers specifically, they've worked with like guys like Zach Banner and bigger guys before. So maybe right, that could be a potential fit. But I don't know. I struggle with Falalele, especially in the first round. Like that would. He's a big guy who can manhandle you when you get your hands on, when he gets his hands on you. But with any type of space, that's where he really struggles, and I think that was pretty evident during Senior Bowl practices.
Coming out of last week, is Trevor Penning going in the top 19 for sure?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think he's going first round, but yep. I don't think that he necessarily. It was up and down all week. I think the aggression stuff, you'd like to see a little more controlled, but I mean, scouts loved it. They loved to see that. And
that's why that was obviously the other guy that I did think about. Yeah. I thought that was maybe a little bit too far down the line in terms of the small schools, but that was something that I definitely took into account.
And just putting both you guys on the spot real fast, what's the next wave of tackles? It's a kind of a top-heavy group. A lot of guys are getting attention with Aquanu and Cross and Neal. And then this next wave here, Penning, Raymond, Falalele. Is there a bit of a drop-off? I know Rasheed Walker's in there. Tyler Smith out of Tulsa is getting some buzz. You have the guard conversions of Kennard and Sean Ryan in that group. Who can get excited if maybe the Steelers don't go round one and they want to wait for their turn to come back around? Is that kind of a risk-reward?
Yeah, I think it does kind of fall off a little bit. I think when you look at I'm trying to think of who else you'd plug in there. And these are guys we saw last week, but like Max Mitchell,
Abraham Lucas, maybe.
Yeah, Abe Lucas. I
thought he had a pretty good week.
Yeah, Darian Kennard from Kentucky. Like, is he someone you're looking at there? When you get into that next tier, that's a good question.
Yeah, just looking at my board, I'm just a little concerned that there's going to be a lot of tackles early, maybe 10 taken in the top 40 or 50. And then I'm kind of concerned on, round 3, early day 3 on if there's any starter types out there or not. I know Max Mitchell is probably in that conversation. Yep. Petit Frere is going to get some steam, and it's kind of open season out there. So tackle may not be a position you're going to want to wait on in this class.
And at the same time, I've got issues with a lot of these tackles, but I think a lot of them will go high because it is such a in-demand position across several NFL teams.
All right, let's go Bernard Raymond here for this one. I think that's an interesting fit from that standpoint. Ben, for your assignment this week, you were assigned the cornerback spot for the Seattle Seahawks in round 2, and they pick, I believe, 41 overall there in the second round.
All right, let me calibrate here. Cornerback, round 2, 41, so we're still in the top 50 for Seattle. Pete Carroll. Okay, Ken Norton Jr.'s out. I believe they just hired or promoted their new defensive coordinator a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken, and Clint Hurt. So it should be kind of a continuation of the scheme. That 10th overall pick, I went to the Jets for the Jamal Adams trade last year. So we're going to be picking 41st there. Okay. Stingley, Gardner, Andrew Booth, McDuffie. Let's put them out of the conversation. I think those are the first rounders there. So who are we in conversation with here? Kyer Elam out of Florida, DK Kendrick out of Georgia/Clemson, Kobe Bryant, and Roger Mccreary, I think, is fully in this conversation. You may say, is Mccreary too small? They took Trey Brown last year in the 4th round at Oklahoma, who was kind of on the undersized size as well. So, If I'm sitting here 41st overall, I really like Kobe Bryant and his physicality and size. But if Roger Mccreary is sitting there early second round, I think we would love to run to the podium to take a Roger Mccreary. Maybe not the size and length profile of guys we've taken in the past. This isn't the same cover three, Dan Quinn, Gus Bradley type of scheme out there anymore. So playing a lot more too high stuff, want some more true press man guys. I think Roger Mccreary sitting there at 41st overall would be a steal.
Do we think that Mccreary has any prayer of getting there to 41? Like, do we think that that's even in the realm of possibility for Seattle?
Well, in my scenario here, I'm picking the first round up to this point here. So I told you who the 4 I thought were locks to go in the first round. I think Booth and McDuffie, that's Andrew Booth and Trent McDuffie out of Washington, are going to be big risers, especially after the combine. I think they're both going to be freak testers. We're just going to salivate at what we can do with them at the next level. So those 4 I feel good about. So I got to project on who might fall. It might be a Roger Mccreary. It might be a Perry Elam. So I'm not sure if you guys have a different type of projection there.
Under 30-inch arms, that's going to be a problem for a lot of teams. I thought he had a good week of practice down here. I thought he, what was expected of him at the Senior Bowl. But for a lot of teams, they will not draft a corner with under 30-inch arms in the top 50 picks.
Yeah, I think that'll be interesting to watch there. And we know that John Schneider's still there in Seattle, coming from that Ron Wolf tree in Green Bay. Very, very strict in terms of the body typing standpoint, especially with those early picks. Dane, let's come to you for your last one. You've got the Arizona Cardinals, interior offensive line, and we're going to go late in the draft, so rounds 6 through 7, where was the title I gave you there.
Okay. They could use some help with guard, but looking at center too. Rodney Hudson, I think he's turning 33 this upcoming year. That contract could become an issue at some time. So maybe you're looking to groom a center behind him, someone that you could really develop. And so I'm looking at Nebraska's Cam Jurgens maybe as a possibility there. I like that in that range if he's still available. It's hard to get a real feel for where he's going to be drafted because there's some good tape, there's some bad tape. He's a former tight end. He was a linebacker and tight end in high school, goes to Nebraska. They moved him to the offensive line, which he never played center before. And they moved him there. And so he's only been playing really for 3 years at the center position. So obviously there's some hiccups on his tape. And we know the Cardinals, they like to run that, up tempo, inside outside zone. And that puts a premium on athletic linemen. Jurgens, again, with his background as a tight end, he moves really well laterally. He's really efficient on combinations of his outside range, but he is probably 6'2", 290 at best. So I think the big question is going to be the point of attack power and can he stay under control in space? In a lot of ways, he's kind of like the day 3 developmental version of Tyler Linderbaum, undersized and not nearly as technically proficient. He's he's a developmental version of that. So obviously he's got a long way to go, but if you're going to bet on maybe a center in the later rounds, Jurgens makes sense.
I like it. And certainly a team that we've seen kind of get guys that, number one, they're not afraid of undersized players across the board. So I don't think that's something that's going to scare Arizona off. And the athletic traits are certainly there, kind of fit the profile for that team with Steve Keim as the general manager. Guys, good stuff. Always kind of a fun exercise just to talk about teams all around the NFL and players throughout the course of the draft. We will talk to you both next week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
All right, so as always, the best way to reach us and to get your questions answered here on Draft Mailbag is to head on over to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Spotify. Leave us a rating, leave us a comment, and we will always answer it here on the show. Whether it's a mock draft, a question about rankings, or a specific position, we've got a couple really good ones here today. First, we're going to go over to RJ Field 11, who left a 5-star review saying, thanks for all the great work all year round. Can you rank these 2 tiers on your early big board and compare and contrast their fit in Philly? So, RJ, I'm not going to say I put together a big board and talk about these guys and their fits in Philly, but I will say that I've studied all 6 of these guys. So we can kind of go through strengths and weaknesses and the way you kind of the profile of these 6 players. First, at corner, you brought up Roger Mccreary, Trent McDuffie, and Andrew Booth. And I think when you look at Roger Mccreary, this is a player that we've talked a lot about over the course of the pre-draft process, especially this fall. I mean, 5'11", 190 pounds. Dane just talked about just under 30-inch arms. And so that body type is going to bother some people. There are some teams that are going to remove him based solely off that measurement. You know, you're going to argue whether that's good or bad. But I think when you look at Roger Mccreary, he just checks a lot of boxes in terms of playing the cornerback position. He's a good athlete. He's not a great athlete, but he's a good athlete. He's got fluid hips. He's got the makeup speed, all of that. He's got really good feet. He's got the ability to play in press. He can play in zone. He can play in man. He's got good ball skills. He's really competitive in the run game. He's a good tackler. He rarely missed a tackle. Just a really physical, competitive player. Had a great season this year as a senior. He was first-team All-American, first-team All-SEC. He wins the Cornerback of the Week award for the Senior Bowl, the American team, last week during practice. So I think when you're looking at Roger Mccreary, you're just looking at a guy that checks a lot of boxes at 5'11" and under 190 pounds. Some people may say, all right, this guy's got to play inside. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think you could say that he could play outside, but regardless, just a really, really good football player. And I think a lot of people would say a lot of the same things about Trent McDuffie from Washington. He's listed 5'11", 195, so a similar body type to Mccreary based off the knowledge we know now. He's going to get officially weighed and measured out in Indianapolis for the Combine. But when you look at Trent McDuffie at that size, he's got some of that proven versatility because he has slid inside at times. So some people are going to view him as kind of an off-coverage corner on the perimeter, or that ability to be a nickel. He was a very good special teams player. He's played a lot of special teams over the course of his career. You love the versatility. I love his instincts in both man and zone. He's got solid physical tools. I wouldn't call him like an explosive or special athlete, but the tools are absolutely there that he can play in any coverage you want. Now, again, just a very reliable tackler. So I think when you look at McDuffie, very, very similar in a lot of ways to Roger Mccreary in terms of the skill set and the scheme fit and the play personality, a lot of those same attributes. Now, when you look at Andrew Booth, it's going to be a little bit different because the body type is a little bit different. Andrew Booth, he measures in right now at 6 foot, 195 pounds. He looks like just your typical boundary corner and just a really fluid athlete. The top end speed is there. I think he's got some elite traits that maybe you don't quite see with Mccreary and McDuffie, but I think that the big thing too is that those guys have played a lot more football, and so the instincts are maybe a little bit better with Mccreary and McDuffie. With Booth, this is a guy that's only started one full season just this past year. He was a late starter in 2020. He only started, I believe, 4 games as a sophomore in 2020. So I think when you're looking at Andrew Booth, you're looking at all the elite traits. And I talked about the height, weight, speed aspect, but he will bring the wood as a hitter in the flat. He's got some outstanding tackles coming downhill. The flashes in terms of his ball skills, his ability to finish at the catch point are just flat out outstanding. So I think when you're looking at Andrew Booth, the potential to be one of those shut down outside corners on the perimeter, that's going to be the difference, I think, when you're looking at him versus Mccreary and McDuffie. But again, it's going to come down to scheme fit and what you're looking at in terms of what your cornerback room looks like and what you need and how you like to play defense. I think that you could make the argument for all 3 of those guys going ahead of the other 2. And so it's a really interesting conversation. Then when you get to the pass rushers, you mentioned 3, George Karlaftis, Trayvon Walker, and Jermaine Johnson. I think, again, it's kind of similar. I think you look at Karlaftis and Trayvon Walker, those 2 guys are kind of similar in terms of body type and strengths and weaknesses because they definitely are more of the power leverage type rushers. You look at George Karlaftis, he's listed 6'4", 275. You look at Trayvon Walker, who I talked about a little bit earlier in the show, he's got that similar body type in terms of being, I believe he's 6'5", 275, right, in terms of what they're listed at right now. Both guys have the ability to push the pocket with power. They win with outstanding effort. They're good run defenders. You wouldn't say that they're the most like flexible or explosive athletes, but they both play with with a white hot motor and have the ability to defend the run, and they can push the pocket. I think Karlaftis maybe a little bit more technically advanced. The production was a little bit better with Karlaftis over the course of his career. He burst on the scene as a true freshman and was one of the best players in the Big Ten, whereas Trayvon Walker, he was freshman All-SEC his first year, but didn't really put up big production until this past season as a junior, his first year as a starter. starter. Karlaftis, a 3-year starter with the Boilermakers. So that's going to be the difference there in terms of the profile. But I think when you look at him from a height, weight, speed standpoint and a skill set standpoint, I think they can be pretty comparable. And then when you go to Jermaine Johnson, he's just built a little bit different. He's 6'4", just under 260 pounds. Unlike the other two, he's got outstanding length and he's got a great wingspan. So he's going to look really, really impressive coming off the bus. He's one of the first guys you look at and say, man, like this guy's just really physically imposing. And unlike those other guys, I think he's just got special athletic gifts. The way that he's able to close ground, he's a twitched up athlete. He was able to make cuts at a really high rate. He also flashes really good power, especially with a runway. When he's lined up out wide and he's got plenty of space to be able to operate, he will barrel right through offensive linemen. The only thing with Jermaine Johnson, just 1 year of being a starter and 1 year of real production. He was a backup at Georgia for the first 3 seasons, or the first couple seasons, rather, in college football. He's a JUCO transfer. So 2019, 2020, a backup at Georgia, transfers to Florida State. He's the ACC Defensive Player of the Year and All-American as a senior in 2021. So I think when you look at Jermaine Johnson, just a different body type and skill set. So if you like to, if you want your guy to be purely an edge player, I think Johnson is more your guy. I think if you want to be able to have that flexibility of kicking your guy inside, that's going to be more Karlaftis and Trayvon Walker. So RJ, hope that helps. It's good. 3 of the best players at the respective position here in the 2022 NFL Draft. Let's get to one more question here from Matty G _28. Left a 5-star review. Said, I like the Eagles to go with a trio of something like Cincinnati cornerback Ahmad Gardner, Arkansas wide receiver Traylon Burks, and then Utah linebacker Devin Lloyd in the first round. But I also like some of the linebackers that could slip into the second round. I know that best player available versus positional need has been a long time debate around the NFL, but do you think good position classes or deep pools in one position matter to general managers, or is that just a bad fantasy football habit that I have? So Maddie, it's not a bad habit that you have. I think that it's something that definitely comes into play, but it's not going to come into play for every single team the same way every single season, because all of these decisions, number one, it's a group decision, right? It's not going to be just the GM making the call. You're also looking at the entirety of your roster. You're working with your coaching staff, and so you might look at. So let's use your linebacker example. Let's say you've got Devin Lloyd, and you got the chance to take him at the end of the first round, but you also love, we'll say. Damone Clark from LSU and Chad Muma from Wyoming, and you like a couple of those other guys. You get into the second round. Wow, those guys really, really impressed me. Quay Walker from Georgia, Channing Tindall from Georgia. We'll go down the list, right? So you like the guys that are available in round 2. Maybe that does tip the scales in terms of the direction you go in the first round versus the second round. I think really, though, what it ultimately will come down to when it comes to like position strengths and looking at, that's a big risk to say, hey, we really like this player in round 1. We don't pick again for 38 more selections, but we're going to wait because we like the players that could be available there 38 picks from now. I don't know that everybody operates that way, but what you'll typically see, and you'll hear this all the time when teams trade down, especially on draft night. Hey, the team traded down. They had the 45th pick. They traded down to 48th, and they said, yeah, well, we felt really good. We really liked 3 players there with the 45th pick. And so we felt good that we were going to get one of the guys that we really, really liked. And again, there are so many different factors with all of these decisions because you might like Devin Lloyd as a first round talent, but what does the others, who are the linebackers that are already in your room? How does that compare, in terms of the other linebackers that are available? Because you got to remember all the different off-field aspects of this as well. Do you need a guy to come in and play day one, or can this guy come in and come off the bench and you can kind of work them a little bit from a developmental standpoint. I'm not saying that's the case with Devin Lloyd, but I'm saying that that's the case with a lot of these decisions in terms of trying to highlight who you like at different areas of the draft and grading them against different players at that same position. It's so much harder than just, oh, well, this position is really deep. We can wait to select it. It doesn't necessarily work that way, because the other thing to remember, and we try and talk about this when we do that on the clock segment, is every team operates the draft different. So while you or I might look at this linebacker group and say, oh, this is a really good group. There are a lot of really good players. An NFL team might look at that and say, hey, this is a good group, but 3 of these names are off our board because of physical, from a body type standpoint. One of these guys comes from a lower level of competition, and we typically like our guys from Power 5. One of these guys didn't produce to the level that we really want. One of these guys didn't test extremely well, so he's off our board because he ran a slow 40, right? So you can look at, they're all of these measurements, all of these different things. I think a lot of people say, analytics. All of these are constructed to be able to narrow down, to be able to whittle down the list for NFL teams and really kind of hone in their focus. Hey, these are our priorities. Now let's go draft based off those priorities. And so everybody's going to operate differently from there, and it's going to play into every decision, including whether or not you want to take a position early versus waiting for a little bit later in the draft. I was all over the place with that answer, but I hope that helped there, Maddie. I appreciate the 5-star review. Appreciate the question. Thanks so much to RJ as well. And thank you to all of you out there for listening to this episode. We'll be back later this week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast presented by Life Brand.